Michael Hamm is from Seattle, and he knows a lot of things. Let's listen to what he has.
Can you hear me? If I speak like this, do you take me more seriously? If you hear more bass? Then I'll just... Well, can we just take... We're going to have some time for questions for our morning presenters. Let's have another round of applause for Mark and our presenters this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. And could I ask you to stand for a moment? Let's interoceptively cue up our own bodies, please. Sure. Bring me up a bit here. I have long neck syndrome, so yeah. Okay, so let's just feel our feet on the ground. Let's take a breath. Let's notice the movement of our diaphragm. Become aware of it. Access different parts of our bodies here. So let's bring our arms out to the side, perhaps being careful not to impale your neighbor. And just take a single breath that goes up the midline of your body and then feels like it exhales through the fingertips. And maybe reach up to the limit of comfort toward the ceiling. Do another breath like that, breathing into your feet. And then up to the sky. Great. And coming back down. So we thought, and if the questions are a burden, I wouldn't worry about it.
Tell me what you want me to type in.
Okay. I'll get to it in just a moment. So what we thought for this first little question period, we will have some question time tomorrow. We thought the spirit of that would be more about our collective action as a profession. But especially as it relates to this morning's material, let's think about how this lands for you. And let's celebrate that we're all coming from a different place as practitioners. We all have a really beautiful and different way of working. How is this landing for you? What are the challenges that arise from you? Where's the curiosity, the creativity, the compassion? Where's the love? All those words you used to describe yourself this morning. And we can sort of reflect with our presenters. So maybe the one question you could use for poll everywhere is, if there was a single word that describes an obstacle you feel for implementing or embodying this morning's ideals, what would that be? What comes up for you in terms of like, what's in my way to embodying this more fully? And we can, probably needs to go back up on the screen eventually, yeah. So while that question goes up, let's have a seat, and perhaps I can have some help collecting index cards, if there are any index cards. Can we still hear me okay? Do we have microphones for?
Yeah,
okay, great.
Turn it on. We can share. We can just pass it.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you can keep that because I've got it.
Well, I have a question for Tara.
I'm on now.
So Tara, you said, and we'll come to this in a moment.
Yeah.
Tara, you said this morning it was a lot about getting to know people and saying you have to know who I am.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to that, and you suggested some practical ways of doing that, having some inclusive language and imagery on a website, having some questions on an intake form asking about where people are coming from, perhaps asking their context of life, their family history. Given the complexity of humans, what's enough? You know, since we all contain multitudes, is there a
Like, what's enough information
Yeah,
to be getting
you know,
from them?
if someone is feeling constrained in terms of the time they have in a session?
First of all,
Yeah.
enough is what you can do in an hour, right?
Second, your experience, I'm sure, is that you have to make your clients hush because they're already telling you all of this stuff all through the session. And so I think it's sort of like turning them back into what are you feeling in your body and that sort of stuff. But what's enough is what gets the client to the space where they feel like that they can trust you, and that's going to be different. You know, you got clients that you ask them to fill out a health form and they're like, what do you need to know this for? And you have other clients who are spilling their guts before you can even hand them the piece of paper to tell you why they're there. So I don't think that there's a one size answer to what's enough. I learn something new every day that I need to add to my website, or I need to think about differently, or I need to think about with my clients, or I need to do whatever. So enough is when you're done, and you're probably not ever done. That was as circular an answer as I could come up with in 2 minutes.
We have to be comfortable with not knowing, perhaps.
Yes, that.
Yes. So just on this question of what might stand in your way, not to be negative, yourself, well, that's an interesting one. So I don't know if y'all can see this up here, but we're seeing, confidence, environment, pain, overwhelm, time, inertia, distraction.
Yeah, and again, the ones that are bolder and larger are the ones that it's not just you that typed that one in.
Right. The larger the word,
The more it's been
the more people in
mentioned.
this room have attested to this being a snag. So, any reflections on this, presenters, in terms of?
Well, I don't know what
Yeah.
people mean by self.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, just as a side note, if you type in 2 words, it separates them.
Oh, it could be self-confidence.
Ah, gotcha.
Self-confidence.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Does it work? Did you try with a hyphen? Will it come up? Oh, grammar. Yeah, so try a hyphen.
Hyphen,
See
there we
if
go.
that gets us there. If not, yeah. Because it may divide it. Technology, it's never perfect.
Sorry?
What?
So there is some desire to be heard, or to have the presenters be heard. So maybe we could have, when you speak, the question being asked. Well, the question posed at the top is, what is a single word that describes an obstacle? Was that?
Someone was talking
I see.
here. We could not hear what was being said.
Let me walk around with my microphone, with a microphone perhaps. Do we have a handheld mic, or? Okay. Or Mark is walking around ready to attend here.
And I think the comment that you may not have heard was that if you type in 2 words, that it separates them. So it could be self who knows what up there. And we were suggesting maybe a hyphen in between the words, but it doesn't look like that worked either, right? Oh, it did work? Excuse me while I bend over and look at the... Yeah, okay. Okay.
Gotta pee.
That's, yeah, that's all.
True for us all at times. Can I just see a show of hands? There was the word environment. So as you sift over what was presented this morning, and knowing that we all work in different ways and with different people, do you feel your environment is supportive of these kinds of ideals? Do you feel it's conducive? Are you thinking of perhaps ways of shifting that environment? So I'm just curious to hear from folks. Perhaps we can get a microphone on some folks here.
There is sound. Being in the profession for 10 years, about a year and a half ago, I was in a work environment that I was in for 4 years that just fell apart, like ethical issues, conflict between everybody, and ended really badly, and I was so discouraged that I was really looking to get out of the massage profession. And I had a neighbor who worked for an employment firm introduce me to my current employer. And ironically, the person that made the introduction doesn't believe in chiropractic, but he said he's a good person, a good businessman, and just a good environment. And I fell back in love with massage. And so I was the one who put environment up there because I was in a very destructive work environment, and now I'm just in a really nourishing, fulfilling work environment. And so it's not a problem anymore, but it can be a really huge barrier.
Do we feel that? Barriers, environmental barriers? Yeah. I think it's on all of us to think about our individual agency, but also what we can ask of our employers, of our coworkers, to facilitate that nourishment that Farah was talking about earlier as well. What we need as practitioners to be present with our clients. Question for Cynthia. Is interoception or interoceptive awareness a good thing? Is it something that one should always strive toward?
Okay. I know, I have to put it on.
You know, pain researchers ask that question a lot because, in their opinion, pain is, in particular, something that people are really aware of how much sometimes people are overly sensitive to their pain. And so the concern is, well, we don't really want people to be more aware of their pain, do we? Like, that is not a good thing. And my experience is a different type of awareness. That it typically goes with ruminating about the pain. It's all up here, and I have about pain. And one of the women that I worked with talked about her pain as being like, a monster. Like, she was so afraid of it, and it like ruled her life. And she was miserable. And she was scared to death to bring her attention into her body, into her low back where that pain lived, and was just this huge thing for her. But she'd learned all the distraction things you could learn. She'd gone to every class. She was taking every med. She had done everything. She'd been in pain, chronic pain, for at least 10 to 15 years. And she couldn't believe that when she actually learned and had the courage to bring her attention down closer and closer and closer to that place inside her body where that pain lived, that pain wasn't such a big monster after all. When she really got there, it was like, oh, I can be in this. And so it changed her relationship to it. So I think that there's a misunderstanding a lot of times when that question gets asked about what this work really is. And so I have yet to come across a situation where I would say that it's a problem versus a benefit. I have yet to come across. And I've been doing this work for 40 years. So I'm sure there is one, but I have yet to come across it.
Gauntlet has been thrown. An interoceptive partisan over here. Maybe let's open the floor for some questions here. Yes, sir.
This isn't a question, but another one building on Farah's story. About 20 years ago, I had a chiropractor come in, was working on her, and the tears started pouring out of her eyes, and I asked her what was going on. And she said she hadn't been able to move her shoulder the way she was moving her shoulder now for more than 10 years. And she had re-experienced a car accident where she had been rolled down a slope and put her arm up to save herself. And now her arm was free.
It's amazing.
It works.
There's lots of different words for this, ways of describing this, but most of us probably have been witness to people in our care having the space, having the presence to be able to process something they couldn't process at the time, right? And so it's a cool thing when it happens well. Other questions for our practitioners, for our speakers? Yeah.
Would you say that there's a difference between interoception and introspection?
I keep turning this on, sorry. Yes, but because I would say that the act of paying attention interceptively is really the act of paying attention. And introspection is in thinking, reflecting on what you notice. So you're right that in what I've been talking about and is the combination of those two and supporting the combination of those two. But I think they're also slightly, there's distinctions between them as well. We had a
Oh, a question.
have one.
Oh, delightful.
Yep.
Good job, by the way. Whoever got the colored index cards delights me here. This is the question that I meant to ask, and it can be asked a few different ways. But is there a danger of moving out of scope of practice with some of this stuff? For example, if you're working with someone who's a victim of trauma, who has some heavy stuff going on, where's that line of scope of practice? It's a question we can return to. Maybe another way of saying that is, how would the work you're describing, Cynthia, be different from psychotherapy?
We can both answer this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear
Yeah.
both your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your mic is on, go.
Okay. I get this question all the time. And I particularly get it when I'm we get it from body workers because we're trained to not go into the realm of psychotherapy. And I get it from psychotherapists who think touch is automatically traumatizing. So I get it from both directions.
Or a lawsuit.
So I think the easiest way to answer the question is to give an example. So we work with people, well, you heard about our research, for example, with people of trauma all the time. And really, I developed this intervention working with people who had childhood histories of sexual trauma because they were so disconnected from their bodies and they were coming to see me because they wanted to be less disconnected from their bodies. So, but scope of practice is a tricky one, honestly, and I think we all have. I'm going to say this. I think we all have our own comfort levels of where we draw that line, and nobody can totally draw that line for you. But the way in which I perceive body work, being able to interface with any kind of emotional material, it can be trauma, it could be depression, it could be feeling anything that's an emotional component of which we all feel all the time, and we're going to hear about from our clients all the time, unless they don't tell us, but it's still happening, is that if we just come back to sensation, that's what we're trained to work with. And that's what we can help them pay attention to. And so whenever you're at that place where it's the edge, and you're not sure whether you feel comfortable going over that for you, you can just come back to, what are you noticing physically inside right now? What's the sensation in your body? Let's stay with that. And it takes people out of the story. Because the thing that puts people at risk for going over their scope of practice in psychotherapy is hearing the story of the trauma, hearing the story of what's going on in their lives that's related to trauma recovery, all the things that happen in psychotherapy. You don't need to hear the story. And it's not to say you won't hear it, but you don't need to hear it to do this work. You need to help people be present in their bodies. And if you just come back to that, and it doesn't mean that people don't need psychotherapy. And often if you're working with someone who has a trauma history, you want them to be in psychotherapy. And then you can be in that wonderful thing we now call interprofessional, relationship with a psychotherapist and them with you. And how wonderful is that? So I encourage that as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm still attached here. So I think there's such stigma to the whole idea of mental health that we think it is wholly different from physical health. And then we think, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to cross lines into this mental health thing. But we know where the lines are in physical health. We know that if it's a broken bone, we're not fixing it. Duh. We know that if it's a issue that is a contraindication or a pathology, we know that we refer. And I think with mental health, first we got to get rid of the stigma that there's something unique and different about that. And secondly, to see it as opportunities for referral. When I started doing massage work, everybody thought that they could heal the body if I had one gem, one roll of my arm this way or that way, this unwind or that unwind. I think that did us a real disservice. Yes, we can deal with the body, we can increase interoceptive skills, but when it comes to things that are diagnosable, whether it's physical or psychological, then that's when we know we have stepped out of our scope, where we're trying to do something to diagnose, which we're not allowed to do. And then to do referrals are critically important. Being a part of an interprofessional team, being part of, I always tell my students that you need to be friends with a pharmacist, because you need to be able to call the pharmacist to say, what does this medication do? I'm seeing this happen with my client. But I think if you realize you're not a standalone, that you're part of a team, and that the things that you can do reasonably well are the things that Cynthia is talking about, is getting people in their bodies. And if it you start to get the heebie-jeebies and the client starts to depend on you too much, then that's probably time for a referral, whether it's that they've got diabetes, they've got high blood pressure, they're only coming to you and not to their physician. I mean, those are pretty clear lines in the sand where you say, this is not a place for me to be with my muddy feet. This is for me to make a phone call, to do a warm handoff to another professional where we can work as a team. But I know that I work with bodies and body sensation, and I know that it will help mental health issues, but it's not my job to be able to dig for the answers for their health issues or their mental health issues. Refer? Yes.
Anybody work in private practice all by yourself?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a fair number of us, right? Mm-hmm. That's a little bit, perhaps that mirrors a little bit the mental health profession, but it also is incumbent on us to develop those referral relationships. A lot of the rest of healthcare, those relationships arise just because of physical proximity. We have to reach out and have some connections into the mental health world, into other forms of healthcare, so that we have an intuition as to when our work could be better, could end here and someone else could take over the care of a patient in another domain.
Generally, it's that WTF moment in your session.
The WTF moment.
It's like, hey, okay, I'm out of my league here. That's the referral.
This is above my pay grade.
Yeah, or it's a warm handoff to the pay grade. Right.
Other questions for our speakers here? Question over here. And just make sure to speak into the microphone close so everyone can hear. Yeah.
Okay, does that work?
That works.
This is for you, Cynthia. Did you say that, I think you said that heart rate variability is very hard to change? Did I hear you correctly?
Yep.
And I have a...
Yeah, it's very stable.
Okay, well, what I wanted to suggest that there is, and you can Google it, Institute of Heart Math.
Yeah, I know about
One
it.
word, and that they
Yeah.
have really simple techniques we use with children. And
Yeah. And now there's devices that you can wear on your wrist, and there's all sorts of ways to look at that. Yeah.
I've had a client who's a minor. I've seen her about 6 months, and the last few sessions I've noticed some cutting marks on her arm.
Some cutting.
Yeah, so self-injury, yeah. And it's kind of tricky when you are you going to take mental health first aid? Because boy, have I got answers for you. It's really tricky in addressing that, that the client is coming to you for massage and doing cutting. She wants you to notice, just saying. And you have a client who's a minor. Oregon, what's the minor rule?
We are not mandatory reporters.
True, but in terms of can minors consent to care after a certain age? Like, are they 16? You know, in Maryland, we've got certain laws that say for this, this, and this, if they're 16, they can get help. For this, you got to talk to a parent. For this, you know, unless they're emancipated, everybody goes through the parent. So 17. So yeah. So I would take mental health first aid, and I would just say, I've noticed, or have you noticed? Do not freak out, please, when you notice these marks on your clients. They are probably what's saving them, not what's going to harm them in a serious kind of way, unless, you know, no one notices and it becomes a suicide ideation thing. But in general, I would say, I have noticed this. I'm concerned about you. And then I would say, I think it's important that we either refer you or talk to your parents. Sometimes talking to parents is not appropriate. It's not a safe thing. Again, that's what I asked about for, if you're not mandated reporters, then, you still can. Listen, people, even if it's not mandated, you still can call and ask a question, make a report, and let somebody else investigate who has the skills and the mandate to investigate. But I would just open the door to say, she knows she's going to be showing those to you. She knows that. So I would ask.
One more question over here, yeah?
So my question is around consent and agency and managing expectations. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
So my question is around consent, agency, and managing expectations. I think it's one thing to be present and have the skills to deal with, an issue that comes up for a client and holding that space for them. But to actually invite them, I feel like there needs to be a whole piece to that of saying this is part of the body work that I offer. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a wonderful thing to do, if that's what you want to do. If that's where you want to have what you want to include in your practice, just stating that. You can, when people call on the phone and they don't even know you, you can say, I want to tell you a little bit about how I work, and so they can choose whether to come to see you or not. If you work with a client and you want to expand what you do, you can do the same thing. So I think absolutely that's a great idea. And then you get to just make, you're being really clear. This is how I want to work. This is what I want to include, and see what you get back. But it's also a way of just empowering yourself to say, this is the kind of practice I have. And if that's what you want to do, then you can do it.
Maybe time for one more question.
I heard a timer.
Anybody else think the massage robot was kind of cool?
It wasn't supposed to be.
I see those sort of jigsaw massager things on the internet, and I'm really conflicted, because I see this is not what I do. This is a different thing. But sometimes I want a robot, just to push on my quad.
And if you put a bow on it, it could be present.
Yes. You opened that door too wide.
Well, that was a lovely morning. Thank you for your therapeutic presence.